In terms of events and racing series, what distinguishes the United States overwhelmingly more than any other country, particularly the European countries, is the fact that we race a lot on oval speedways, on oval racetracks. So here is the complete rule book from the first ever oval race, which was held in the United States. Not too long, is it? Here we are looking at the location of the first ever auto race on an oval speedway at the Rhode Island State Fair in 1896. So obviously it's since been developed over into various housing additions, but we can see somewhat the shape denoted by the yellow dashed line, but also the names of the various streets. We've got Fiat, Packard, Cadillac, all mentioned as names, and so we can see that kind of that automotive legacy. Trivia, this first ever oval speedway event was won by an electric car. So that's kind of cool, kind of not. And so this state fair venue, this Rhode Island State venue, originally was a horse track in which there's horse racing occurring here. And so it's kind of, we see this natural evolution from a lot of these horse racetracks to automobile racetracks, these dirt ovals all throughout the country. Further, there's a lot of good things about this particular venue type compared to the point-to-point public road venues we saw prior. First off, you can make some money from ticketing spectators, and so people would pay a ticket, they would come into your venue, they would sit in an assigned seat, and then you could make some money. Whereas in the public point-to-point races on public roads, pretty much anybody could go up to the street, go up to the road, watch the race, boom, take off, you didn't have to pay. Further, to lessen the spectator casualties, oval races became popular because you could put a fence or a barrier that separates spectators from participants, from flying race cars. Further, you could see the entire venue when you would attend these races. And so because the oval tracks is kind of what we like about oval track racing is we can see the entire track, where point-to-point races on public roads, car goes by, boom, you're not going to see it for a while. You're going to be sitting there waiting to see that car come by again. Some of the drawbacks pretty much are related to the dust and the dirt that are kicked up from the cars, going on the dirt surface and picking up a lot of that sediment, that dirt with their tires, and then kicking it up into the spectator seating areas. And so that would be the only drawback to dirt track racing at the time here in the United States. Another more local example of the evolution of dirt horse tracks to racing is the Indiana State Fairgrounds, which held a automobile event in 1903. So these races oftentimes would be paired up with the actual state fair. So it's another way to build the event, to make the event even more of a spectacle, is to have it take place during a state fair. And then vice versa, the event could then also draw more people to the state fair, and the midway and the cuisine and all of that. So the state fairgrounds here in Indiana actually held an automobile race before the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A quote by A.J. Foyt here shows, I think, the characteristics that you would find at a dirt fair racetrack. We still see some of these today, but at the time, these were events that you had a lot going on. It was all about drawing in as many people as possible. I would argue the most famous racing venue in the world is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which was built in 1909. It's the first purpose-built speedway in the United States. What that means, it was built strictly for automobile racing. Whereas the other examples I gave, the Vanderbilt Cup was a point-to-point race held on public roads, and those dirt track races were held on venues that were originally built for horses. They weren't built for automobile races. And so this was also built to showcase the Indiana automobile industry. At the time, Indiana automobile industry was competing head-to-head with Detroit. Was competing head-to-head with Cleveland and Toledo and Chicago. And so we were wanting to showcase how dynamic, how great our local automobile industry was. And so by constructing this venue was seen as a way to promote it, a way to showcase that. Further, it was also seen as a venue to test out new ideas. And so we can see how this was originally built very much with the local area in mind, as far as promoting the local automotive industry. Further, this is one of the first and only paid venues that you would find up until World War II. So originally it was kind of a crushed stone tar mix, but later on became brick paved. We know it as the Brickyard today. And so why are there hardly any venues that were built before World War II that used paved or asphalt? Well, because asphalt really wasn't perfected yet. It wasn't really something that was widely used and did not progress to the technology we see it today. Further, we're talking about very, very tight economically, especially during the Great Depression. And brick paved venue that's 2.5 miles, that cost a lot of money. And so we think about the expense associated as well. Why was this a preferred way, though, compared to dirt tracks? Is that you reduce the dirt and all the kind of the visibility concerns for spectators that we'd find with dirt tracks, kicking up all that dirt and dust and so on. Some have argued as a way to prohibit motorsport in Great Britain that the government enacted the Motor Car Act of 1903, which essentially all public roads, you had a mandatory speed limit of 20 miles per hour. So you could not drive fast on public roads. And so that was seen as maybe a way, some have argued, to prevent the growth of motorsport in Great Britain. So this was a concern for the British automobile industry. At the time, think about the French dominating, and the French and the British are like rivals, they're like cats and dogs, Yankees and Red Sox. And so while the French were dominating automotive technology, the British were kind of lagging behind. So they created a purpose-built speedway, which was the first of its kind, that was strictly for testing, but allowing cars to go as fast as they could. So it kind of was this whole privatization of roads to kind of get around this whole Motor Car Act of 1903. Why am I talking about Brooklands after the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? Brooklands was the inspiration for the construction of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So this was the first purpose-built speedway that then led to, over time, the development of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway 2 years later. This is a map that showcases the location and venue types of race events that comprise the National Championship calendar events from 1909 to 1914 under the regulation and sanctioning of the AAA. So once again, we can see the role of the AAA as a sanctioning body. Some patterns we note, we can see some dispersed patterns. We can see some race events held there in New York, Philadelphia, kind of that urban area there along the East Coast. We can see these race events in the Midwest, and we can also see along the West Coast. Also, what we notice, for the most part, we see road course races held on public street venues. We also see a few red dots, which indicate dirt oval tracks, and so those are going to be at a lot of fairground tracks that were converted to from horse tracks to auto race tracks. Then, of course, that one blue dot that really sticks out is that paved oval, which was very much one of a kind, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Then came this very interesting era in motorsport. It was very short-lived, and that's the board track oval era, from about 1910 to about 1931, and another one of these distinctively American traditions. So what was going on here was, once again, it was all about speed. It was all about a race being even more exciting because cars are going even faster. And so how could we get these oval tracks to produce even faster race cars? Let's bank them. Let's put a very, very steep, smooth bank surface. Let's put it up and then have the cars go around. So that was largely inspired by the very highly banked wood surfaces used in bicycle velodromes. And so bicycle races, for instance, we have the velodrome in Indianapolis. These were originally wooden. So think of like a basketball floor, a hardwood basketball floor, but for an entire racing circuit, but also extremely steep bank. So cars could go much faster than they ever could beforehand. So we had record-breaking speeds. Further, that then led to further advancements in engine and tire designs. As cars are going even faster, cars are sustaining RPMs at a higher level than ever before. Tires were undergoing pressures they'd never have gone beforehand. So this led to a lot of innovations which helped to even spur even further increases in speeds using these various facilities. A lot of these early board ovals were located in urban areas where you saw large population clusters, but also in areas where, guess what, they have trees, because obviously wood was a key component to the board ovals. And so these board ovals would also typically be built close to railroads so that then that lumber could be trucked in. And so you can, actually fairly quickly build one of these board ovals. However, these venues led to a very, very quick demise. Problems. Very simple problem is these wood boards, particularly in the Midwest and the northern climates, hell, anywhere, would warp very easily. So you get a little bit of rain, a little bit of sun, and all of a sudden this very smooth surface is going to be quite bumpy, as now the wood is warped. And so it became quite expensive to constantly replace the wood. Further, these venues, as they call it, created a whole lot of new records and new speeds, were also extremely dangerous. And so these were referred to as murder drums because so many people died from the high speeds. But just imagine what would happen if you went flying off the top of this banking in this image here. Here we see motorcycles racing on the Beverly Hills Board Oval. This Beverly Hills Board Oval was actually originally built to attract people to move out to Los Angeles and Beverly Hills from the Midwest or the East Coast. It's seen as maybe creating an attraction, creating something that people would want to see. And of course, these races became quite popular. As more and more people moved out to this area, though, it led to this particular venue's demise as real estate became too valuable. But once again, we can see how these venues popped up in urban areas throughout the United States. One of my less interesting hobbies is like to go through Google Earth and Google Maps to try to find old racing venues. In this case, we can see very, very faintly the remnants of a board oval called the Atlantic City Speedway that was around the 1920s and was torn down sometime there in the early 1930s. Why I talk about this particular board oval is the fact that in 1927, it was producing such fast speeds that they were 20 miles per hour faster during that same year than the speeds that you would find at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a purpose-built paved venue that was seen at the time to be one of a kind, the location of the fastest race cars in the world. So you can see why these board ovals were popular, because they produced extremely fast speeds that were exciting, but you can also see how they're deadly. These speeds were, at the time, the safety wasn't up to the level that these cars were moving, especially without many barriers to keep these cars from flying over the sides. This map here just takes the previous map that we looked at national championship venues on the AAA schedule during these set amount of years, but then moves it to more current, so 1915 to 1931. What we notice here is we can see less and less of those road course races on public streets and more of these purpose-built board oval or paved oval venues popping up. Further, where do we see the board ovals? We don't see them in the middle of nowhere. We don't see them where we don't find trees. We find them in urban areas that are also close to forested areas. Makes a whole lot of sense.